know you're going to talk to other people that have been abducted, and they're going to tell you about the fear. And the fear never goes away, ever. It will be with you till the day you die.
Clearly these intrusive procedures are happening without people's consent.
There is an alien abduction phenomenon, but it's not how people generally think about it. I think it's an internal event. I don't think there are real aliens coming in and taking away people and doing experiments on them.
After nearly 32 years, I have yet to find one case to indicate that the Earth has ever been visited by extraterrestrials.
If there is, in fact, some non-human intelligence in using some kind of non-human technology, suddenly interacting with us, it's the biggest event in human history.
Whether you choose to believe it's real or not, the alien abduction phenomenon does exist. People do believe that they are being taken from their beds, from their cars, from where they work, and spirited away by what they can only describe as extraterrestrial beings. Nick Pope, formerly on the UFO desk at the Ministry of Defense, has written a book on the subject of abductions, and his research has thrown up several theories about what may be behind this mystery.
There are many different theories about what really lies behind the abduction accounts. At their most simple level, clearly there is strong evidence that we are dealing with an extraterrestrial civilization coming to Earth and simply carrying out some sort of procedure on people. But there are other options too. Some people talk about some sort of interdimensional element to this. Now, at first I thought that this sounded like science fiction, but when you look at some of the bizarre notions being discussed quite seriously now by physicists, particularly in the world of quantum mechanics, ideas of time travel and ideas of interdimensional beings perhaps don't seem as far-fetched as they might have done 5 or 10 years ago.
There seems, however, to be a pattern and similarity to these events occurring to all these different people.
The account of somebody seeing a blue-white beam of light and sometimes being struck by it is something that I've come across again and again.
Dr. Susan Blackmore takes a more skeptical stance towards abductions being alien in origin, but she too has recognized a pattern emerging from these accounts.
If they see an alien, the alien tends to be about 4 foot high, big, dark, slanty, almond-shaped eyes, penetrating gaze.
A lot of people comment on the eyes and feel that they are the focus of the control that they're somehow being placed under.
Usually the alien speaks to them without using any words. It's as though they're using telepathy or mind-to-mind communication of some kind. Then, very often, they're whisked away or zoomed down a tunnel or whatever and find themselves in a spacecraft.
Typically, an abductee will report a round white room with some sort of table or raised platform in the centre.
And have various operations done on them, as though the aliens are trying to find out things about them.
One of the things that they then were told by the entities was a rather bland statement: "Don't worry, you have nothing to fear. This will not hurt you." Very often, of course, that was totally at odds with what was happening.
The individual who perhaps more than any other brought abductions to the forefront of the public's mind is the author Whitley Strieber. His bestseller, Communion, is a personal account of his own abduction. He believes, though, that he had been singled out as a target for abduction many years before.
Where we are now is the location of the Secret School, a place that I came to when I was a little child, 9 and 10 years old, with groups of other children. We would come here on our bicycles and ride up the little straight cut and park our bicycles by that large tree, and then go beyond to a group of benches and have something that I believe was some sort of a close encounter. There was somebody who would meet us there, who was dressed in black and had a black hood on. We had helmets put on our heads, and we saw incredibly vivid imagery in these helmets that had to do with the creation of the world and the way evolution has occurred over the geological eons, why the Earth has life on it, and things like that.
Like many abductees, Strieber believes that aliens have played a key role throughout his life, but to this day does not know why they chose him.
Following the publishing of The Secret School, I got a lot of letters about people having similar experiences as children, and especially people saying what's happening to their children now.
The one thing we do know is that if someone has been having abduction experiences, which they will have throughout their life again and again, as if they're an involuntary specimen in somebody's long-term study, and that person then comes to maturity and produces children of his or her own, it's very likely that one or more of those children will also be abducted.
Recently we've seen the development of the idea that abductions run in families. Now this is again broadens out the whole issue again. If you put yourself in the place of a child, of someone who feels that they were abducted, that they were subject to painful medical examination, they went through a wholly terrifying experience, and you feel that happened to your parents because your parents tell you that's what happened to them and that it's likely to happen to you, those kids must be living in intense fear.
Of the 8 people whom I've remembered being in the group, myself and one other have turned out pretty normally. I have normal marriages and normal careers. The rest of them are in varying degrees in trouble. One of them has died, 2 of them have disappeared. One of them has committed suicide, and the others are recluses who live near here but will not come out and be seen by anyone, not even me.
Bud Hopkins is America's most well-known abductions investigator. Having examined several hundred cases, there is one that for him remains the most compelling and extraordinary to date.
As far as I'm concerned, the most important abduction case that we have on record involved Linda Cortila, and this happened in 1989, November 30th, in New York City.
I don't expect people to believe it, and I'm not trying to convince anyone either. It's up to them. But I know what happened to me.
In this particular case, a UFO above an apartment building in New York City turned on all of its lights. It had been apparently unseeable until that point.
I felt a presence in the room, and I felt this numbness crawling up from my toes, up to my legs. And when I opened my eyes, there was this creature, this thing, standing at the foot of my bed. It had large black eyes. It was sort of gray, and it didn't belong there. There was nothing that I could do but throw a big decorative pillow at this creature, and he fell back. I hit him.
A bluish-white beam of light came out of the bottom of the craft, and at that point, this woman, Linda Cortila, in a fetal position, and 3 small alien figures floated out of a 12-story window in full view of anyone around.
Right out this window, here. I felt as though I was on an invisible elevator going up and into this craft. I would have screamed my head off, but I couldn't. The only thing I remembered after that was that I felt myself dropping into my bed. I knew that wasn't a dream.
Hopkins alleges that there were several witnesses to the event that night. A woman who saw it from the Brooklyn Bridge, and a group of people in a motorcade saw it from the FDR Expressway.
The point about it is it was deliberately staged so people would see it, because in the group of cars that were several important political figures were heading down South Street to a helicopter pad to leave Manhattan. And it was as if the aliens wanted these people to see what they could do.
Yvonne Smith is another abductions researcher who stands by the amazing claims in the Cortila case.
This case is extraordinary because it has so many witnesses that saw the craft hovering over her apartment building.
These witnesses have been hard to track down, making themselves known to Hopkins only by letter and audio tape. This, Hopkins claims, is because one of them was a very high-ranking diplomat who didn't want to jeopardize his position.
The third man, as I call him, wrote me a letter saying that he would like someday to be able to make public what he'd seen. He described in his letter the event of that night, watching this woman float out a window with 3 aliens and how staggered he was.
My position stands firm. I cannot and will not give a hint concerning my involvement.
The lack of witnesses independent of Cortile and Hopkins has led most researchers to dismiss this account as too fantastic to be believed.
I wouldn't give the Linda Cortile case time of day. This is not science, this is hearsay. Anybody could say that they saw this or they saw that, and this is how these mythologies are created.
What we really need to take forward research into this important matter is the involvement of mainstream science and the involvement of governments. It's only these two bodies that really, I think, can take us now forward and perhaps achieve some sort of breakthrough.
UFO researcher Stanton Friedman pinpoints the moment when abductions research gained a new level of respectability within the scientific community.
It was a really big time for abduction research when 2 outstanding professors, Dr. John Mack from Harvard University Medical School, who's written the book Abducted, and Dr. Pritchard, a physicist, pretty high-level physicist from MIT, lots of publications and stuff, agreed to co-sponsor a conference at MIT. The invitations went out to specialized people. They published the proceedings. The whole point was to let the therapy community, if I can call it that, know that respectable people are involved.
One of the hosts of the conference, Dr. John Mack, found that his less-than-skeptical stance created problems for him at Harvard, where he worked, but he refused to compromise his beliefs.
I'm inclined to think that they are not from some specific planet, that they exist in some energetic dimension that is not familiar to us, or if it is, it's only in theoretical physics. Does that mean it's not real? No. It means we've got to stretch our notions of what's real to include things that are much more subtle than what we're used to.
As a psychiatrist, Mack defends the abductees against claims of madness or self-publicity.
The idea that somehow these are people trying to get attention seems to die hard. Yes, sure, there are a couple of authors that have had some success along with the trauma of this experience, but the vast majority of the people that have had these experiences gain nothing from it and are not seeking any sort of publicity, and in fact want to stay away from the media.
From my personal evaluation of whether these people are making something up to try to get attention for themselves, no, they're not. Most of them really believe that these things happen. Most of them are struggling with the question of whether it's real or not, and they divide and switch back and forth. But if they conclude that it's real, it doesn't convince me as a scientist that it's real.
There appears to be little doubt that the abductees believe that something has happened to them. Dr. Chris French is one who dismisses the alien theory, but is sympathetic to the abductees.
Now, interestingly, the common reaction is to say that these people are just all barking mad. Well, the evidence suggests that no, they're not. In terms of the actual psychological profile, there are no obvious signs with most of them. I have to emphasise that, with most of them, that there is any kind of psychopathology.
It starts to drop, and we were all like, oh my God, it's going to crash. And I remember jumping up.
There's nothing from the standpoint of the kind of work they do, where they live, that distinguishes them. They seem to be quite a broad cross-section of the country. I have healthcare administrator, waitress, professor, theologian, just about any kind of person that you can imagine.
Given that most abductees have experienced a real or perceived trauma, is there anywhere they can go for help? Runs a support group in Manhattan where they can share their experiences. His assistant, Peter Robbins, explains.
The main function of the support group is to be in a group dynamic where the other people have a shared experience with you, which immediately allows people to let down their guard a bit, discuss things more frankly than they might in a seemingly less safe situation, and have an opportunity for catharsis when necessary.
Hey, maybe alien beings have really actually removed me from my place of residence and have done, I don't know what,
In these support groups, there's very strong social pressure because initially the person might not be able to remember their own abduction experience, and yet all the people around them can. And to become a kind of full member of the group, again, there's a great social pressure to try and dig up that memory that by now you're convinced is really there. And that's exactly what, at the end of the day, they're able to do.
If you're upset, it's a perfectly safe situation to be upset in, and that people do not judge you or think that you're strange because you've had experiences that the outside world might judge as unusual.
I woke up paralyzed, and I could move my eyes. There was diffuse blue light in the room. I could see my clock radio over here with my eyes, and it was 3 o'clock, and I could see the light was outside.
Whilst the support group is a forum for the sharing of conscious memory, most of it is at best fragmentary.
They have snatches and snippets of memory, and it's that haunting question of what happened to me. I know something strange happened to me. Was it a dream? Am I just going crazy? What is it? They come to someone like me or Bud Hopkins or David Jacobs, and we begin to start investigating the case.
Using hypnosis seems to be the only method we have of getting at what exactly occurred.
Hopkins and fellow researchers advocate the use of hypnosis.
Hypnosis, of course, has been the whipping boy of the skeptics because it's used very frequently in this. Hypnosis can very, very easily be misused. If a very clever interrogator can lead somebody in normal conversation, which we know if you watch lawyers in action, under hypnosis it's even easier to do that.
Dr. David Jacobs, a colleague of Hopkins, believes that memories recovered under hypnosis, whilst not foolproof, can be checked for accuracy.
We've learned to ask purposely misleading questions, and sometimes very subtly misleading questions, just to see if the abductee can be led.
And I'll say to a child, or when they took you in that room, that big round room that you told me about, what did they give you to eat? Because they always give you something to eat. And of course, they never give you something to eat. But the child will, if the child says, oh, we had a pizza, you know that the story is not exactly a stable story.
It's asking the right questions in the right way at the right time. That takes years of training, we found.
Can you see enough to make out any facial features? It's got a pointed chin.
Can hypnosis be misused? Of course it can. That isn't the question. The question is, can it be used? Can it be used by people who have learned how to use it properly? Can you help people? That's what it's all about.
We want to know about this.
Two victims of an episode of missing time are Peter and Diane Shepherd. They hope that hypnotic regression can uncover a mystery which happened to them in the early hours of the morning whilst driving back from friends more than 20 years ago.
There was a pronounced dip in the road. It is pronounced, it's about 12 to 15 foot deep. There was nothing in the sky or in front of the car when we started going down the dip, but as the car levelled up, as it just rolled gently to the bottom of the dip, suddenly this light or object switched on in front of the car.
I leaned forward on the dashboard of the car and I just said, oh my God. And that is the last thing that I actually remember.
So I turned to look at her and she had her hands on the dashboard and her eyes were wide open, her mouth was wide open and she was completely motionless, just like a statue. I wanted to get out of there, but I couldn't do anything. And I said, please, please, this is in my mind. I'm thinking, please, please stop, I can't take any more. Before I'd even got the thought out, before it had even formulated, it was over. And we're about 200 yards up the road. And I hear Diane say, what's happened? Where have they gone? What's happened? The stillness had gone.
And
the dawn was already coming up in the eastern sky.
That was what made us aware that we had missing time.
We want to know about this. We want to fill in this. I definitely want to fill in this gap.
Just allow them to float and dissipate and disappear in front of you. And when you get to that stage, your mind will be completely relaxed.
Experienced hypnotherapist Robert Lamont regressed Diane Shepherd 2 decades back to that deserted road.
So you've now got out of the car on your own?
Yes.
So you've opened the door?
Yes.
And you're now standing outside of the vehicle?
I walked forward, past the car.
Can you describe this figure, this person?
Well, they're very tall, like I said, and they've got an enormous head, like an Egyptian.
The large Egyptian head immediately struck a chord with me because, fortunately or unfortunately in this particular case, I'm fully aware that she had a chap called Terry Waters do a lecture for her a year previously, and she has got a copy of his book and his video, and right on the front of it is exactly the same description as she gave me yesterday of the large Egyptian head with the wide nose and the mouth.
My being suddenly became with his being. The emotion was overwhelming. It was the same feeling of when I was outside, except that it was just one.
Author and arch-skeptic Phil Klass is not convinced by the value of these hypnotic techniques.
I am told that the British Psychiatric Association has recently released a statement emphasizing that information obtained under hypnosis is very likely to be false and spurious.
I will have people look at me and I can see it in their eyes. They don't believe me, but I don't really care. I know what I saw and I don't care what they think.
The thing that most worries me about the whole abduction business is now that it's become so common and so many people think they've been abducted, I am sure that quite a lot of those people haven't been.
There's something damned true here that's got to be gotten out to the public, because until it is gotten out, people are passive. They're helpless. They're sitting there just letting it happen to them and not knowing what it is.